My name is Mladen Jovanovic, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at BindiMaps. My involvement with BindiMaps started in the very early days after I was lucky enough to meet Anna Wright, who's our CEO and the original founder of the company. So Anna had the idea back in the early 2000s, but it wasn't until 2016 that the technology actually caught up and it allowed Anna to make her dreams into a reality. So Anna was diagnosed with a rare eye disorder where the doctors said, you're going to go blind. It's a matter of time. You need to start thinking about it. So then Anna put her thinking hat on and went through an accelerator program, and they built an amazing system, which was it was an MVP at the time. So it was just a proof of concept, but it really proved that technology can assist people who are blind or vision impaired to navigate unfamiliar indoor spaces. And it was all about restoring independence to people in the disability community and allowing them to do things that they couldn't otherwise independently. And when I met Anna back in January of 2017, she told me about the problem that she was solving, and I was working on another startup at the time. But the problem that Anna was solving actually had a social impact, and it was a for-purpose company, whereas what I was working on was it was more just impacting the bottom line of property development companies. So I decided that Anna's idea had a much better impact on the world, and that's something that I wanted to be a part of, and I was lucky enough to be invited in.
What are some of the key differences running a for-purpose venture compared to running a purely for-profit venture?
There was something that I read recently where they said that any company in the next 10 years that doesn't have a social impact or doesn't have some sort of purpose is going to die. They're not going to be around for much longer, and that doesn't matter how big they are. Because in the world that we live in today, I think every company needs to have a purpose. Every company needs to be doing their part, whether it be sustainability, social impact, whatever that may be. And a key difference is, as you mentioned, being able to get up in the morning and know that you're making a difference, because there are going to be hard times with every startup. There are going to be hard times, whether that's, product development, whether that's just not having someone to bounce ideas off because you're a solo founder. But then there is that purpose that just keeps you going. So personally for me, before I met Anna and before I started working at BindiMaps, I don't think I had anyone who had a disability in my circles. And it was in the early days when Anna explained the problem that it was a complete shock to me. I mean, the simple question of, if someone's blind and they go into a new building, fair enough, there's Braille on the restrooms, but how are they going to find the Braille? I mean, that question completely changed my perspective on so many things. And I was lucky enough to encounter a lady who published a 2-page spread in the AFR talking about how the university she was going to wasn't providing assistance in her learning. And she was someone who was vision impaired, and she moved from the country to the university to study. And I was lucky enough to get on a call, and I was just asking her a lot of questions around, how she goes about her day-to-day, how does she study, what are some of the roadblocks and challenges. And then we got to the end of that interview, and I asked her, I said, if you had a magic wand and you can wave that around and change one thing in the world, what would it be? And she said that it would be to have TGSIs, or tactile ground surface indicators. So if you've ever gone across a traffic light or at a train station, and you've seen or felt those little tactile markings on the ground, they're used to communicate to people who use a cane or who have a guide dog to, that there is a road coming up or there's some sort of hazard. There's different indicators for different things. And she explained if she could have tactiles all over the world, so she can essentially feel her way from one place to another, and she can navigate the world. And I explained the idea that Anna had for BindiMaps, and she said if something like that existed, that would completely change my life. That would just be a whole different ballgame for me. And just having that in the back of my mind for the last 6 or 7 years, however long we've been operating, when the hard times do come, that's something that just keeps you going. So I think for a startup, it's very important to have a purpose and to be able to align yourself to some sort of social impact or some sort of impact on the world outside of just generating profit.
How do you balance the purpose of creating social impact with the need for profitability?
Social impact is very broad. And purpose and profit can go hand in hand. So I can't speak for every business, but personally, putting my sales hat on, I think that even if you have a for-purpose business, you can align that to overarching business initiatives, and you can show the impact on bottom line for businesses for implementing your solution. It's hard. It is difficult, and it varies in difficulty from company to company. But I think that if you're able to really think about how the impact that your company is making can impact your customers' bottom line, that's where that opens up a whole new stream of conversations. So we were talking about, how does implementing BindiMaps actually benefit a KPMG or an Ernst & Young because they've installed it in their office. And then we start looking into things like, okay, if KPMG was to implement BindiMaps, which they have, by the way, amazing client, they would all of a sudden make their offices completely accessible. And what does that allow them to do, right? That allows them to hire more people with disabilities. Great. What does that allow them to do? Okay, so now that you've hired more people with disabilities, you've opened up your doors to people who are blind, people in wheelchairs, people with autism. What is the impact that delivers on the community? How many people have you hired from the community that have a disability? Let's say arbitrary number 10. Okay, what does that mean? So then we start digging into statistics around, it's proven that people who have a disability and are unemployed are far more likely to go to the doctors than people who are employed and have a disability. So then you're looking at, okay, what's the cost to the government for actually subsidizing those doctor's appointments? What's the cost to the community? What's the cost to the taxpayers? And then you can actually build up a business case from there and say, okay, well, actually by paying, $1,000 for BindiMaps, you are actually saving the community $30,000 in healthcare. You are saving the community X amount of this, X amount of this, X amount of this. And then that ties into their business initiatives, because as I said earlier, every company that doesn't have a social impact is going to die. Let me rephrase that. Any company that doesn't have some sort of ESG initiative is not going to be around, or any sort of purpose is not going to be around. That's why all of these big corporates are putting together disability action plans. They're putting together ESG plans, focusing on sustainability, putting together scoring matrices to understand, what is their impact on the environment. Everyone's focusing towards net zero and so on. So by being able to tie those statistics and that impact that they're delivering back to their community to their overarching business challenges, that holds a lot of weight. And they can truly make an impact on bottom line, on community, on so many other things. So I think it's not a question of balancing purpose and profit. I think it's making them work together, making the purpose drive profit.
What was one of the biggest challenges that BindiMaps has faced?
One of the biggest challenges that our company faced, especially in the early days, was educating customers about social impact, about accessibility, about ESG, because we started our journey before there was such a big focus on social impact. It was just, we were just at the beginning where people were really starting to talk about it. So when we took the product to the market, it was like we actually had people turn around and say, what is my dollar return per blind person by implementing this? So, and that was one of the most horrific conversations to have with customers, right? Because we needed to educate them that you're not looking for your dollar return, right? You're looking about what I just said in the last question about what is that purpose and impact, and how does that align to your initiatives? So I think the education piece and really talking people through why BindiMaps is important and what impact that has on the community and how you can change people's lives. I think that, and getting that into mainstream and aligning that to business initiatives, is probably one of the hardest things that, speaking from the commercial side of the business, that we had to go through. And I know that the product team would have a million other stories about product development, because we have really, our entire product doesn't rely on any third-party service providers. All of our algorithms, everything is built in-house. And I think building this groundbreaking technology with such high accuracy with indoor positioning systems would have been a huge feat in itself. And hats off to the product team. So I think those are probably the two biggest ones.
BindiMaps recently won the title of Global Champions at the 2023 UN World Summit Awards. What was involved in that?
We could not be more excited to have mid-year, a mid-year award to get everyone out of the slump and the financial year. And it's just such an amazing achievement from the entire team. So we were in Mexico recently for the 2023 United Nations World Summit Awards. And what the World Summit Awards are, it's an annual award ceremony or conference where it's a few days in a chosen destination that the United Nations pick, the United Nations Congress, and then everyone gathers and they talk about, the pressing issues around the world for that year. And they also bring companies to pitch on stage and compete for a global champion. So globally, there were over 182 countries that applied, and there were multiple companies from each country. There were several rounds of judging. The most recent one was in Jakarta, where they had the final round to pick the top 4 or 5 companies per category and welcome them to the United Nations World Summit Awards. And what they were really assessing is how strongly do these businesses align to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? What sort of an impact are they making on the world? And is that something that aligns to the UN? We were lucky enough to actually get shortlisted and go to the Global Summit Awards, which were in Puebla in Mexico. And when we were there, they split the companies up into different categories. BindiMaps was a part of the smart settlements and urbanization category, which it was very competitive, and there were a lot of other companies in there. And what we did was we pitched on stage in front of the UN Global Congress, and the main things that they were evaluating the pitch on were how big is the problem, what is the solution, and what is the impact. Those were the three criteria on which we were judged. And then one thing to keep in mind, everyone that attended was already a winner from their home country. Everyone was already a winner for that category. And throughout the pitch, they had to determine who was the global overarching champion for each category. Being awarded the global champion for the World Summit Awards, I think it was probably one of the most amazing feelings personally, and amazing things that our company went through. And the main reason was because of the recognition of how big the problem is that we're trying to solve, because of the recognition of all the hard work the team has put into actually creating a solution to solve this problem, and for recognizing how big the problem is. 1 in 5 people across the globe have some form of varying ability. And to start asking questions around what's my dollar return per person that's going to come in for this and use this system, that shift in the way people think needs to happen. And going through that and being awarded the global champions for the World Summit Awards, I think that is another testament to how big and important this problem is. And we're really hoping that this serves as another feather in our cap to show people's way of thinking needs to change. So yeah, it was amazing.
And what opportunities can BindiMaps expect to see after receiving an award like this?
So being recognized as global champions, or even being a part of that entire process, does give you huge access to an international network. And from our perspective, it didn't change the trajectory of the company, because we're still going towards our North Star of making places accessible. But what this allows us to do is lean on the UN members, the UN Congress, the UNWSA jurors for expansion, for investment, for sales, for teams, for recruitment, for anything that we need. We have that network open now. We were lucky enough to form strong relationships with the people on the ground. And after the program was over, everyone's got a Slack channel or a WhatsApp group, and you can reach out to whoever you need. And the reason why they're doing this, it's not a monetary return, it's not for profit, but it's because we're all aligned on the same purpose. We all want to solve the same problems, and that's why they're willing to lend us their networks and open up as many doors as possible.
How would you say BindiMaps defines success?
When we were at the World Summit Awards and I did the pitch on stage, one of the judges asked me afterwards, how do you measure impact? Fair enough, you've got your system out there. How do you measure impact? What is the metric that you align your company to? And that got me thinking. And my answer was, it depends. And it depends because there are many different ways of measuring impact for BindiMaps. You've got your base level of number of users using the system, right? Then you can make the assumption, or you can see through analytics how many people use text and audio, how many people in wheelchairs got to their destination. You can start looking at that level of impact. But then when you start looking at what's the impact to the customer, now we start tying the system into sustainability initiatives, right? So if we have BindiMaps deployed through an office building and we see that, floors 3 and 4 of the building are completely unoccupied from Monday to Thursday, that allows the company or the customer to optimize their HVAC system so they're not cooling or heating those floors because there's no one on those floors. And then you start looking at energy optimization. So that's another metric of how do we measure impact. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think for BindiMaps, impact is very strongly aligned to success. Obviously, there are on the commercial side of the business, there are success metrics around, Have we hit the number of customers? Have we hit the, the revenue figures that we're going for, and things like that. But I think if you're asking what does success mean to BindiMaps, I think it means a strong measure of impact on our community, on our customers, and on the world in general. So that would be probably the number one indicator of success.
BindiMaps went through the Melbourne Accelerator Program in 2019. How was your experience?
I think the decision on Maps' part to allow people to join the accelerator program from a social impact stream was probably one of the best decisions ever made. And it was hugely beneficial to us as a company, because after having a look at the past companies that have come out of MAP, they're all amazing companies doing some amazing things that have had some tremendous growth. And we wanted to be a part of that. We wanted to be a startup that came out of the Melbourne Accelerator Program. And especially at the time we were thinking about expanding into Melbourne, we were only Sydney based and we had a small team. I think we had about 6 people. Having the ability to actually go through the MAP program and having those introductions, speaking to the investors, having the cohort there to lean on, I think it was just a massive launch pad for us into a new market, and then on the other end it was into a new phase of growth. The way that the program was put together, and we covered everything from legal and investment and sales, and there were so many things that were covered. I think that was really essential for us in that part of our growth, to be a part of the Melbourne Accelerator Program. And actually, the biggest thing for us, I would say, is the expansion into the new market and the introductions and the network that MAP has. But being able to get all of the learnings and lean on all the mentors throughout the program as well was hugely beneficial. So I think with every startup, everything needs improvement, right? But it's just figuring out what are your priorities. And MAP was amazing at showing me what structure looks like. From the workshops that everyone ran, to goal setting, to overall how MAP was structured, and the way that we had the mentor dinners and things like that. It showed me that no matter what you're doing, structure is really important. And that carried over to, me heading up sales, the way that we run sales. Everything is structured, everything is process driven, everything is systematic. So I think that probably would have been the biggest thing that we got from MAP. So in order of benefits, I guess, number one would have been the network that MAP has and who we were able to lean on there. And then 2 would have been the cohort and the actual content and material they shared with us throughout the program.
Do you have any advice for this year's MAP cohort?
Any valuable advice? Be a part of as much as possible. I think don't look at it as just a program to go in and get as much content out. Start thinking about, how do I contribute back? And the reason why is because you're going to form such strong bonds with the people that are in your cohort, not just in your cohort, but just that are a part of that ecosystem. And you will be able to lean on them for so many things, and they are going to want to lean on you for so many things. Because everyone has their thing that they're experts in, and I think it would be such a wasted opportunity if you don't get involved as much as possible, if you don't go to all the events, and if you don't go to all the talks and networks and whatever it is you're doing. Make sure that you are involved as much as possible, because it is going to be such a wasted opportunity, and you are going to be kicking yourself if you're not.
If you could do it all again, what would you do differently?
We were very lucky because we were the last year before COVID came around, so we had that office presence, even though it was in the old crappy office. It wasn't in the new fancy one in Melbourne Connect, but it was such an amazing time. I think taking my own advice on that one, what I would do is I would have gotten involved more. I did go to a lot of the events, but I think that there would have been a lot more I could have done, specifically with networking with the people who were holding the mentor sessions and the courses. I think that was such a missed opportunity on my part. Because I was one of those people that in some of those courses that just got the content, right? I didn't think about, hey, this person, even though it's not for us at this stage of our company growth and life cycle, this person may be very useful in the future. So I think taking my own advice, I would get involved as much as possible and reach out to any person that comes through and that gets introduced to you via the MAP team. Because looking at the companies that have come out of MAP and how long MAP has been around, it is definitely one of the best and most reputable accelerator programs in Australia. And for someone to be invited to speak at one of these programs and to be in one of your workshops, you better know that they have something to offer. And you shouldn't pass up that opportunity to get in front of them and get their contact details and see how much you can network with them. So yeah, I would drink my own Kool-Aid on that one.
Do you have any advice for people trying to get started in the social impact startup space?
If you're thinking about how do I get started in the social impact space, I would think about what are some of the problems that I see around me that need solving. I wouldn't specifically focus on, and I could be completely wrong, but I wouldn't focus on what is the social impact that I want to make at the moment. Different story if you're a for-profit business that isn't clearly aligned to your impact, and then you have to go through that process of saying, hey, we should actually be making an impact. But if you're an entrepreneur thinking, I want to start, I want to get into the startup space, I want to start my own company, and I want it to have a social impact, I would start thinking more about, what are some of the problems that are close to my heart that I want to solve? Because going back, this has been said thousands and thousands of times, startups are hard. And if you don't have something that, gets you out of bed and keeps you going and makes all of the time and effort that you put in worth it, you're not gonna end up executing. Something's gonna happen. It's gonna fall to the wayside. It's gonna get too hard. And that's okay. That's normal. I mean, yeah, if you don't have a strong purpose, it's not gonna work. So I wouldn't focus on what is the social impact I want to make in the context of what I just said. I would focus on what is the problem that I want to solve.
What does the next 5 years look like for BindiMaps?
It's a scary time because it's uncharted territory for anyone in the company, for everyone in the company, actually, because I'm lucky enough to be paired up with two other co-founders that have had experience in growing companies and going through IPO and everything else that comes along with it. But none of us have actually taken a company international. Last year, we signed a sales agreement with the European Union, and we installed in the first airport in Hungary. We installed in a couple of sites in New Zealand now. We're getting a lot of interest coming out of the US on the West Coast, some on the East Coast, Singapore. So to answer your question, we don't know, but we're very hopeful that it's going to be something big and amazing.
Any final words?
The main thing for me, and I said it throughout one of the questions, was over the past few weeks that I've been traveling, I've had a lot of time to reflect on where I am at personally, and there is no way that I would be where I'm at personally without my team. So really a massive testament to the team and all the things that they've been able to do for me and for our company and for themselves, and for the world and the impact that we've been able to make. So hats off to them. I'm just a tiny little cog in this big machine. So very happy to be a part of it.